Well, hey there, DevCentral community. It's that time again. It is Thursday at 12:30 Pacific, and so it's time to live stream. It's time to hang out with everybody. So I'm John, and this is the Security Sidebar DevCentral Connects live stream, and I'm excited to be here and to talk about security with everybody. So I see a couple of notes have already come in. Abdullah, hello. So it's good to see you, my friend. I appreciate you being here. And then Leaf is apparently hanging out with the acronym finder or something. So Leaf, you're here to learn about cardiovascular events, CVEs. Let's do this thing. Let's go, right? And we're going to be talking about that today, CVEs and all that. Maybe there's something slightly different than cardiovascular events, but who knows? You never know where the conversation's going to go with this thing, you know. So that's why you tune in, right? Or dare I say, commercially verified equipment, that may be a CVE, that is a CVE, or circuit verification environment. So Leaf, man, I appreciate the acronym finder, work that you've done today. So, hey, it's great to see everybody. Like I said, just a little announcement. One, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to get notifications on all the shows and all the live streams and all that. Also, next week, we're going to be doing agility. And so Jason and I will be together. We're going to be live streaming on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. And so it's going to be awesome. So look forward to seeing everybody there. And then we'll be back the next week with our normal 12:30 Pacific, live stream shows. So anyway, looking forward to all of that with everybody. So today we are going to talk about CVEs, among other things. Maybe it's not cardiovascular stuff or commercially, verified equipment. Maybe it has something to do with common vulnerabilities and exposures and those kinds of things, right? So anyway, but I have got with me today one of the best from the Security Incident Response Team, Mr. Megazone, who has been living and breathing, security incidents and responses for several years now. He is like the best that F5 has to offer. And so anyway, so I am going to bring him on and welcome him to all of you. And we're going to talk about all kinds of stuff, security. So welcome to Mr. Megazone. And there he is, Megazone. Great to see you, my friend. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Hey, so we talked about, the title of this is, hey, what's that CVE or, CVE stuff, right? And I know you work on the Security Incident Response Team. So maybe you could start off really quick with just saying what is the CERT, Security Incident Response Team, and what's the purpose? What do you guys do there?
Okay. Well, the name kind of explains a lot of it right there. Security Incident Response Team. So when there is a security incident, generally with our customers, our team is responsible for handling our responses to that, which that can range from customers running into exploits, calling into support. I know we talked about our ESRP process. We'll probably talk about that a little bit more, where a customer needs assistance from the security side of addressing a compromise or a DOS attack or what's going on. Security incident could also be a vulnerability in the product. And so handling vulnerabilities and publishing them, handling our disclosure process, that's also something that CERT does as well. It's pretty all-encompassing of if it's a security incident, we're probably with F5, we're probably involved.
Gotcha. So all things security related, Wow. So you mentioned that ESRP, that whole process. Maybe tell us a little bit more about that. Like, what is it and why is it important?
Sure. That's the emergency security response process, which is what's called internally. It's, emergency security response, I think, to the public, but generally, obviously, everything has a process. Classic example there is a customer is experiencing an attack of some sort. The F5 customer is experiencing, it could be a DOS attack, it could be a credential stuffing attack, whatever is happening to their site using the F5 equipment. So they'll open a case with support and say, hey, I'm under attack right now. It could be the site's down from a DOS attack, or it could be a site where credential stuffing is going on, like they're concerned about a breach. How can I use F5? What equipment I've got? Maybe I've got Big IP, I've got ASM, I've got different products in place. how can I configure this? What can I do? Can I do an I rule? What can I do to at least triage it, stop the bleeding, stabilize the environment, so that we can then take a breath and think about, okay, what can we implement, longer term. And within the F5 support organization, we have a number called F5 cert specialists who are designated to handle those type of security cases. If it's flagged internally as an ESRP case, it's handled by an F5 cert security specialist, and then they have the core team engineers like myself and several of my colleagues around the globe who can take escalations and work with those specialists for adding further deeper product knowledge or just more experience to help with that. So the idea is to really help those customers who are in a crisis at that time get things stabilized, so that everybody can calm down and not run around with their hair on fire under an attack, and then figure out, okay, how do we address this longer term. Maybe they don't currently have a WAF in place, so we can get an I rule together just to prevent the current attack. And then look at, we would recommend maybe you have a WAF, so that, because that would prevent this kind of thing in the future. That's not the kind of thing you want to deploy under fire necessarily. So try to get things to the point where you can think about deploying a better solution.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So it's that emergency moment, where people are having problems, and you're like, hey, let me put out the fire, let me triage, stop the bleeding, and then kind of go from there. So that's a critically important thing, no doubt about it. Well, good stuff, man. Well, we talk about vulnerabilities, we talk about CVEs, common vulnerabilities and exposures, right? Yep. And I guess when those things are put together, there's actually a CVE numbering authority, a CNA, right? And F5 actually is one, so we can number these things. So I guess talk to us about how that works. I just find that fascinating, that it's like, hey, you see a CVE come out, it's like, well, someone numbered that a 10 or a 9.5 or an 8 or a 2 or a whatever, right? So how does some of that work, and how does the CERT play a part in numbering some of these CEs?
Sure. And I'll have to control myself, because that's actually my primary role within this series. I'm the vulnerability guy, so I could talk probably all day about the different aspects of that. So common vulnerabilities, exposures, it's a system. So those who are familiar with it, it's a standardized way, or who aren't familiar with it, I should say, it's a standardized way of addressing a vulnerability. So if you say, hey, are we exposed to that TLS vulnerability? And people will be like, which one from the several that have been published, right? CVE, the whole idea is to give a vulnerability a reference number, so that you can say, is it 2020-1278, right, or whatever? I have no idea. That's probably a real CVE. I have no idea what it is. Just pick a number. And people, I know exactly what you're talking about, because that number refers to a specific thing. And so it's a way for cross vendors, across products, across different security tools, you can reference a CVE, and everyone will know you're talking about the same thing. Right. It's really designed for clarity and for tracking. So that CVE numbers, that program is run from the MITRE Corporation. They're like the parent, the root CNA, or the CVE Number Authority. As the program's grown, most major vendors are participants in the CVE program, and it's open to any vendor really to join, even open source program stuff now too. Several years ago now, F5 became what's called the CNA, the CVE Numbering Authority. Where I said MITRE is like the root, it's kind of a little bit like DNS structure, where you can have delegations, and rather than having everyone go to MITRE every time they need a CVE number, which doesn't scale well, what MITRE does is if you pass certain bars to become a CNA, and you agree to the program, you sign up with the program, you agree to do certain things, they basically give you the authority to number your own CVE. So you'll get assigned blocks, and then you number yourself. So F5 is CNA, and I'm our liaison to MITRE for this program. And when F5 has a vulnerability in our product, that's something that's unique to F5, we'll issue that a CVE number. And that's how, the recent ones that got published, like CVE 2021-22986 was one of the ones we just recently published, like one of the criticals. And so, we gave it that number. We have a block to use in the year. CVEs are always CVE-year- some number. And by the way, for those who aren't, it's not linearly increasing. The blocks are kind of issued randomly around. So Doesn't mean there were 22,000 CVEs published already this year. It's just that our block happens to start in the 22,000 range.
So really quick on that. So that is interesting. They're not just numbered from 1 to infinity or whatever in that order. So then do we get a certain block? Like our first CVE is always going to be 22,000 whatever, or is it just totally random?
It's basically random. The current system, and there are transitions happening. CVE program is evolving as it gets bigger. It hasn't been linear for a while, and the current system is a CNA can request a block of some number. Like you can go, hey, I have 20 CVE numbers, and you'll get a block randomly assigned. And if you go back 6 months later and say, give me 20 more, it probably will not be contiguous with that first block because you'll get another random block. We, as a larger vendors might request, hey, I need 500 CVEs in a block. It depends on what you think you're going to use ahead of time. Then I'll grab a block at the start of the year, as our liaison that I think will probably cover us for the year. We'll see, just to be safe. Moving forward, there's efforts in the CVE program. I don't want to go too far into this, but there's automations being put in place, and the idea will be there'll be an API with MITRE. Instead of giving blocks out ahead of time to CNAs, the CNAs will be able to dynamically request CVEs on demand from MITRE, so that instead of right now there's humans in the loop, we'll get the humans out of the loop, automate things so it scales better, and so the block system may be phased out. It looks like it probably will over time, but then it'll probably be even more purely random because it'll just be one giant pool, and you ask for a CVE, and you'll get whatever CVE comes up next. So,
gotcha.
So there might not be any contiguity like numbering sequencing.
Okay.
But don't want to go too far into like how the CVE program works, so we're going to do a whole talk on how the CVE program works, and MITRE has plenty of information about that. But the one thing you touched on there was the other numbers involve the scoring, and I mentioned like we had a critical 2296. There's lows, medium, highs, criticals. Mm-hmm. That's all another C, which is CVSS, the Common Vulnerability Scoring System. I hope I remembered that acronym correctly. Mm-hmm. And that provides a structured way. There's what's called a vector. There's two parts to a CVSS score. Everyone calls it the score, but it's actually a score, which is a number like 6.5, 8.9, whatever, and a vector. And if you understand what the vector spells out, it's basically a bunch of letters and colons and slashes, that list everything out. That vector tells you a bit about what that vulnerability is. It'll tell you is the attack network or local or physical attack. Is it privileges are required or not? What is the impact on confidentiality, integrity, or availability? Mm-hmm. And so and if it's low, medium, or high, none, low, or high impact on those. So it's that vector is a nice compact way of representing characteristics about the vulnerability. And the vector is when you do the scoring, you do the vector, and the vector, there's a calculations. If you go to first.org, they're the maintainer, like MITRE runs a CVE program. First.org maintains CVSS as a kind of a community standard. And the current version is 3.1. 3.0 is still very common. 3.1 is the latest tweak. And based on the vector, there's a kind of complex scoring system in the background that creates the score number based on the vector that you decide things are affected. And then those are broken down by the kind of, for a long time, there's consensus that if it's a 9 or above, it's a critical. And I'm going to blank on the right numbers, but if it's less than 9 down to, I think it was 5 or something like that. I should remember this off my head. For some reason I'm blanking, but that's a high, and then there's mediums and there's lows. So it's basically you have to find if the score comes out between these certain ranges, because humans like to talk words. So like when this is a medium vulnerability. It's a lot better. This is a 6.4 vulnerability.
Right.
It's like so it's easier for humans just to call something that's a critical or that's a medium, that's a high when you're talking to somebody. Then here's a number that you have to remember. What does that number mean?
Right. Yeah. Like what scale is it? Or, it's better to have kind of that fuzzy, it's critical or it's high, right. That's cool.
Yeah. And so that's how, they all go together. So you score when a vulnerability comes up in our products, it's scored as for how it will affect our, the F5 product, and we score things that goes when we publish a CVE, we'll publish the score that go along with it, the score and the vector, technically. So that some of our larger customers especially use those in their own vulnerability tracking systems or third-party tools. We'll use those vectors when helping them decide. We might call something a high, but for one customer, like this is something that's going to affect us. We need to address this right away. Or for other customers, it might be a high, but only if you're running a certain module. And if you're a customer who's not running that module, it's a non-issue for you. So it's not an absolute thing. Like a high isn't a high universally. There's always context on these things, and that's just the real world.
Yeah. Which makes perfect sense, But I find it fascinating that, F5 being the numbering authority can control, a bit of the numbering. But it's also true that I think there's different entities around F5, the CERT being one of them, where we kind of check ourselves, if you will. Like there's not just one guy sitting in the corner deciding, hey, this one's a 9.8 and that's it, right? So
right.
How does that work? How does some of those checks and balances work, or how have we built those in a little bit around F5?
So the primary scoring is actually done. Some of the score is like what is the factor? What level of authentication is needed? Does this require authentication? Does this require access? If this is just exploited, what does it get you? And those all go into that calculation, the vector you create. So the primary scores are usually first prepared within our product engineering team, our development group, because they know the code, they know like whatever group is responsible for the entity or the object within the product. It all breaks down, right? It's like feature function teams. We'll do the initial scoring. I think this is kind of a score. They'll provide a score. We have a platform security team, which is part of the product engineering group, who's kind of our direct counterparts. The F5 CERT in the reporting structure is part of like the global services reporting structure, which is our support side of the house. The PlatSec is kind of our counterparts who work with security issues from within the development side of the house and help they do things internally to the product engineering teams, like internal security training and development training, secure development practices, and all those kinds of things. So they work because often, when you're talking security, you're talking things like scoring CVSS. Any given developer may not be fully fluent in the systems. So one of the things PlatSec works with them to like, okay, well, they have domain specialized knowledge in the security aspects, and so they'll work with the people who have the domain specialized knowledge in the code of that particular module. And they'll work together with them to determine like what the score should be. So the first scores will come out of the product engineering and the PlatSec side of the house. As they come through, it goes through several different hands. Depending on what type of vulnerability is. In general, like for F5 issues, it's always going to go through the F5 CERT. We're responsible for handling issues that are F5 code issues, as opposed to the differentiator. There would be things like, say, it's a Linux CVE that's published and originally originates from outside of F5, but obviously Linux is used in several of our products, or OpenSSL is used in several of our products. So they might publish CVE, and then we will look at that public now CVE and determine how does that impact us and our customers, and provide our own information in a security advisory. That's a separate process because we can't fix that issue. Like as far as the code fix, like we can only incorporate fixes. It's somebody else's product that we're using in our product. For things where we're responsible for the code, what we consider an F5 vulnerability, we'll handle those. So we'll review those scores that we get, and also make sure that they make sense to us. And if we're like, why did you score it this way? You said this. Can you explain this? So there are some cases where it's kind of obvious. You look at it and go, yeah, this all looks good. Other cases, you might look at it and go, you said there's no impact on availability, but couldn't this, if you did this with this vulnerability, wouldn't that be like a DOS? Like, oh yeah, I guess maybe it would be. Okay, well, we need to change the availability impact score. So it gets reviewed at several different levels. There's some group reviews we do on things before they get published, and then even when it goes to the Ask F5 team that actually creates the public documentation based on all the data we've gathered working with the issue. Our knowledge services teams that create the public security advisory that goes out. We work with them to do that. And they have people on board who have a lot of experience too. So they might even ask questions as we're giving information. And sometimes you can be too close to an issue or have maybe too much knowledge of internals. So you see something like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's perfectly obvious. And you give to somebody who maybe doesn't have that much, and as they're working it, to be like, this doesn't seem clear to me. Can you clarify? And we might end up reworking things because they're like another check to make sure that before we go public, there's review processes and things to try to there's several different steps along the way to try to make it so that when we do publish something, it's clear and understandable to our customer base, so that they get the understanding they need from that security advisory of, is this going to affect them, the products they run, what is the impact, what are the steps that can be taken. Obviously usually it's installing a fixed version, but are there mitigations available, are there workarounds, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like you said, I mean, a lot of times it's like, hey, update or upgrade, but short of that, sometimes there are mitigation steps, like, hey, you need to unplug this or plug that in, or stop exposing your management port to the internet, right? That's that's just a good general overall, right? So
that's a good rule to live by. Don't put your management interfaces on the internet. That's
right. Hey, so kind of along those lines, there are some companies out there, some organizations say, hey, if we get a CVE that has a CVSS score of 2 or 1, where it's basically like, hey, this is not anything big, basically, then they don't share it necessarily with the world or with their customers. Right. However, we at F5 take a different approach, and we share all of them. Is that right? And then maybe what's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, the CVE is a voluntary program, so I'll say that up front. Like, there's nobody requiring any vendor to do CVEs, or even if you're in the CVE program, there's not really any hard requirement that you will publish things. So there are people who are members of the CVE program who haven't published a vulnerability in several years. I'm not going to name anybody, that wouldn't be nice, but there are some large vendors who haven't published a vulnerability in several years. And it's very hard to believe they haven't had a single security issue in their products in that time.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a voluntary thing. We take it, I won't say to an extreme, but we believe very much in, our customers can't make informed decisions about their networks and our products' presence in their networks if we don't inform them. Mm-hmm. And it's their network, and ultimately it's their responsibility and their decision to make on, does this affect me? Is this something I need to be concerned about? Do I need to take action? Do I need to take action? And all these different things. And I personally believe, and I'm one of the people on the circuit who drives this a lot and is a vulnerability guy, that we have an obligation to inform our customers when there are issues in the products that we sold them that they're running, so that they can make those decisions. Like, because for a low, you might say, some vendors might say things, and some of the other CNAs do this. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong in this. So I want to say that up front. There's different approaches. I'm like, well, we don't want to, cry wolf, and we're not going to. So if it's below, it's a 3 or below, or whatever the number is, it's a low. Yeah, who cares, right? It's a low. So we're not going to publish all those. That's just like noise. Well, my philosophy is a little different, and F5's philosophy is a little different. That there are a number of exploits that have happened out there in the wild where somebody chained together a couple of lows and got a working exploit that got them access to something. A low by itself might be a low for a reason. Okay, it doesn't really get you much. It's hard to exploit, whatever the reason it's scored as low. But sometimes a low is a foothold. And there might be other lows, or maybe that low manages to get you to what you manage to. Some people are very clever, can chain together some of these minor vulnerabilities, and it's kind of like getting all the holes to line up, and then they find their way through by walking through these minor vulnerabilities that people are like, oh, don't worry about it. And we've seen some of those things happen over the years where people have exploited. So I'm not in favor of the attitude that some have of, if it's less than a high, I don't care. If it's a low, forget it. It doesn't matter. It's like, no, that maybe it's not, a fire drill, like a critical might be. Like, you don't have to rush and do it right now, but you shouldn't leave that low unaddressed forever in your network. It's still a vulnerability. It might be very limited or whatever, but you never know when these puzzle pieces are all going to click together, and you're going to end up accumulating these lows in your network, and accumulation could turn into something bigger. Sometimes 2 + 2 is more than 4. You can get these little things to add up. So our philosophy is basically to try to publish things, and we do try to do it in a responsible way. You don't want to drop a 0 day on your own customers, and that's never polite. So if you can avoid it. So we always try to, when we find issues in our products, we work to get those fixed as quickly as we can through our engineering groups. And then when we announce them, we try to go public with it when we have fixes available. So we can say, hey, we're telling you about this vulnerability, and here's what you can do about it. There have been times sometimes you're unfortunately forced either by external forces or something to announce something before you have fixes ready. But that doesn't do much good for anyone, really. But it's finding that balance and trying to inform people in a responsible way that they have issues, and it's also owning your own, your errors. Every vendor has bugs. Every vendor has security issues, really. And I've been in the industry for a few decades. It's been anyone who says they don't have any issues, I'd actually question a lot more than someone who says we have issues and here's how we deal with them. And here's what we've done. And that's how my philosophy with this and our philosophy as a company is tell people about the problems, inform them, try to find that balance again between giving them enough information to understand what they do and not tipping too much information, because there are black hats out there who read these security advisories, and you don't want to give them a roadmap to attacking your customer base. That would be nice to our customers again. But so it's trying to find that right balance of how much can we disclose so customers can get a good understanding without telling people exactly what they do to do the attack. Like, it might be a bad packet arrives or a malformed packet or something, we'll say in a security advisory, instead of saying a packet with an MTU of a value above this amount, and you start giving too many details, it's not really that useful for in many cases to actually do anything about it, but it's really useful if you want to conduct the attack.
Right.
So you try to find that balance, and it's not always an easy process, but we have a lot of discussions about these before they go out.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I think it lends to the credibility of the organization when you're willing to be transparent and, dare I say, vulnerable, whatever. But just to say, hey, this is real. I mean, no one is immune to this. There is no company out there that has zero vulnerabilities. And it's better to own those and to share those and say, hey, this is what's going on. Like you said, then at least people can make informed decisions. So, but that's got to be a challenge to balance that, not give the attackers kind of that lighted path to say, hey, by the way, this is exactly how you exploit this thing, or this is exactly where you need to point your weapons or whatever. So that's a challenge. Well, hey, one other quick thing I was going to ask is, actually a couple of things. Maybe we can kind of wrap these up because I know we're kind of running low on time. These things always go so fast. I say that every time. But a couple of things. One, back in the day, whatever back in the day, I guess was, primarily we being F5, we're focused on like the big IP family of offerings and maybe some big IQ, but now we've got like NGINX and others. We've had some recent acquisitions, so there's a larger, I don't know, population of technology that you've got to look at, for all these vulnerabilities. And so one, I wanted to get your just thoughts on how do you keep up with all that, whatever. And then also, if there's someone out there watching this and they want to know how to get involved, or if it's like, hey, my proverbial house is on fire, who do I call? Then what's a good way for them to reach out and access you guys?
Yeah, I guess I'll tackle the last first. Is we do the other thing I do? I guess we didn't even touch on this really. Is one of the other things the F5 cert does is we are F5's public point of contact for security researchers. Mm-hmm. So if somebody extra, like a customer finds something, you're generally going to be opening a support case and reporting something through support. Like, hey, I think I found an issue. I've experienced a problem, and we'll identify a security issue. But there are lots of security researchers out there that some of which we've worked with repeatedly. Others might pop up. Just, they might have. Sometimes they're doing a pen test or a security check on one of our customers, and they find an issue, or maybe they're just poking at an F5 product for the fun of poking at a product. And F5cert at f5.com is our public email address. And we also, there's a reporting page. If you look for like security, I think you Google something like security reporting F5. We have a couple of pages on the F5 website and the Ask F5 website. We have a public PGP key for people if you have something you want to report and you want to secure it, sending it to us. But we take those, we'll take those public security reports and we work with those researchers, to reproduce the issue internally, get those tickets open, and we'll handle that issue if a public or researcher has something. That's one of the other things we do, and that's if you want to get involved. From a customer perspective, the number one thing I would recommend is we have an F5 security alerts mailing list. which is when we announce CVEs in our products or other security related, things that we need to announce to customers to send out as a push. That's the best list to be on. So F5 announces a CVE, there'll be an email sent to that mailing list. That's a good way to keep up to date with those things and get that proactive notification. And that's just available. If you go to our website, there's a email list and subscription area. We have other mailing lists at the company, and one of them is the security alerts mailing list. I believe, as you mentioned, other products. You're correct in that. When we started off several years ago as the F5 cert. It started off several years ago as the F5 cert. Primarily, it was big IP. We're involved with Big IP and Big IQ, Enterprise Manager back then, and Big IQ, but yeah, since then, we've started covering Nginx products, Nginx controller, for example, and we're working with the Nginx teams since that acquisition. I'm working on that. People keep pinging me. So we have these acquisitions. We were working with them since the acquisition to bring you more of the Nginx products into our security practices, as we are, as they're now part of F5 and we are a CNA. And you've probably been seeing, for Nginx customers, may have been seeing Nginx controller. We have published some CVEs. There's also some more recent acquisitions like Shape or Votera, those are more services. So CVE is more of a software products world, but we still do work with those teams to talk about security, and we have regular sync meetings with them. And also, obviously we dog food ourselves, right? We our Silverline teams, our other teams are running F5 products to provide those services. So we definitely work with those teams as things are found in our products to make sure that our services are also being secured. They're basically a customer of F5. They're kind of an internal customer using our product, our hardware, our software. So there are a number of things we do. So for customers, the primary thing, I guess, would be get on the mailing list. And also, if you go to Ask F5, there's an XML and RSS feed you can set up. You can do a custom RSS feed on the site, and you can create a custom RSS feed just for security advisories, which is what they're called as a document type. So, if you want to get a feed of all new security advisories that get published through Ask F5, the mailing list for security researchers, F5cert at F5.com, is the way to report things to us. And we get, like I said, PGP keys out there and things. So there's several points of contact to get us. And if you're a customer of a security incident, go through support. You just tell them as you're opening the case, this is a security incident. And if they're following our processes, they'll flag that as an ESRP.
Yeah, nice. The ESRP that we talked about at the very beginning. I love it. Well, that's awesome, man. Well, hey, it's we're at time now, which like I said, it always flies by so fast. Oh my goodness, we could just spend all day talking about this, and it would be fascinating. But yeah, man. But Megazone, I really appreciate your time and your expertise and your relentless work in this area. I mean, I have just seen the tip of the iceberg with some of these CVEs that have come out recently, and I can only imagine the hours you put in on this stuff. So I just appreciate all the hard work and you being willing to join us today and share all the knowledge.
I'm glad I could join you.
Awesome, man. All right. Well, hey, you take care. Thanks again for coming on the show. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
Awesome. Wow. Megazone. What a guy, man. That guy is supremely brilliant. I think he's memorized every CVE that's ever been published in the history of the world. I remember a couple of CVEs we worked on back several months ago, and he knows every single version of every big IP software release there is, and what's vulnerable, what's not, just all that kind of stuff. It's crazy. So, man, I just appreciate Megazone being on here and all the work that the CERT team does. It's really cool to kind of take a peek under the hood, if you will, on how that whole process works and what they're involved in every day. So anyway, wanted to just say hello really quickly to a couple of people who had chimed in. Anise, good day. It's good to see you. So thanks for hopping in there. And then Aditya, it's hackers are working hard, so we have to. Good vibes, man. That's awesome. Yeah, it's good to keep that in mind, right, Aditya? So anyway. And then I know some people have been dropping stuff in the chat a little bit here. If you need help, here's numbers you can call, 1-800 numbers. Here's Leslie. Appreciate you dropping that in there. F5cert at f5.com. In case you're wondering, exactly the spelling of that email. CERT being SIRT, Security Incident Response Team, not CERT. There's a lot of different certs, I guess, right? So anyway, but hey, I hope no one's under like crazy attack or, stuff's blowing up or whatever. But if that does happen, please know that we've got a team that stands by that works this, 24/7, 365, and they are amazing at what they do. So anyway, so this has been another awesome Security Sidebar live stream. It's great to connect with all of you. And again, a little reminder, next week we'll be doing the live agility shows on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. So we won't technically have DevCentral Connects next week, but the following week after that, we will. So Thursdays, 12:30 p.m. Pacific. And again, it's great to connect with all of you and to stay in touch and be part of the greatest community in the history of the world, right? The DevCentral community. So thanks again to everyone for being a part of this community, and you guys have a great day.